recording, we will start recording. And the first item, apologies for absence, please. Darryl, could you give us any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Thomas for this afternoon's meeting. And just for those listening to the live stream, at the moment we don't have Councillors Jackson or Kemp on the call. So we have 28 of our 31 members on the call. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we move on to item 1. There are 2 sets of minutes to approve as a true and correct copy of the meetings held on the 23rd of April and the 30th of April. So are you all able to accept these minutes? Is anyone against these minutes? If no one puts anything in the chat box, we'll assume that everyone is in favour of these minutes. Yes?
Nobody is indicating a wish to type in the chat box, Chair, so I think we can assume they are.
We can assume that's okay then. Very good. So we'll move on to item 2, which is urgent business, and I have no items of urgent business at present. Item 3, exempt information. At the moment, there is no need to divide the agenda. Item 4, declarations of interest. Members, I invite you to declare any personal or disclosable pecuniary interest. Any declarations will need to state if the interest is personal or a disclosable pecuniary and the nature of the interest. Members, does anyone have an interest which they wish to declare, please? No? Fine, okay. We move on to item 5, which was business brought forward by the chairman. I've got no items of business brought forward. So we move on then to item 6, which is the adoption of the Plymouth and South West Devon Supplementary Planning Document. And I will ask our leader, Mrs. Judy Pearce, to introduce the report, please. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Supplementary planning documents add further detail and guidance to the policies in a local plan and are material considerations when making decisions on planning applications. The Plymouth and South West Devon JLP was adopted in March 2019, providing councils with an up-to-date local plan which will inform decision-making on planning applications. I think you'll all agree it's working very well, but it's a high-level strategic document covering a wide geographical area and a broad range of policies. The adoption of the SDP following the due consultation stages will benefit planning applicants as it provides greater clarity about how policies will be applied and why. It will provide a greater degree of transparency in decision making and provide more certainty for applicants and developers. It will assist officers and members in their application of the JLP policies, resulting in consistent decision making that delivers consistently sustainable development. Its adoption will also benefit planning applications as it provides greater clarity about how policies will be applied and why. It will provide a greater degree of transparency in decision making and provide more certainty for applicants and developers. It will also assist officers and members in their application of the policies, resulting in consistent decision making that again delivers consistently sustainable development. Members, this document represents a huge amount of detailed work by officers and through consultation as to how we want and need the JLP to work. The JLP is proving to be a highly effective local plan. The detailed SPD will provide additional consistency in detail and authority as a material consideration to future decisions. Both West Devon and Plymouth have already approved this document. I have to remind you that as it's one that has to be approved by all 3 councils, no amendments to the recommendations are possible. You can only vote for or against it, but hope you can vote for it. You should remember that the excellent barn guide, which we've had for some time, is also included in the recommendations, is the developer contributions evidence base. This mainly deals with Plymouth, but there are parts of it that are relevant to the TTV, that is to our areas. I have heard of a couple of things that might come up, so I'll head them off now maybe. First of all, There were very few recommendations from councillors. I think there were, comments from councillors in the final consultation. I think I'm right in saying there were 2 from Councillor Birch and 1 from Councillor Chown, and that is all from South Hams members. That's not a criticism, I'm just stating that is the fact. And I think the style of an SPD is different from policy. So you will see a lot of shoulds in it. And if you read other people's SPDs, you'll see a lot of mays as well. But we can't really say must because it is only a material consideration and it isn't policies. Anyway, having said all that, I'll invite questions, please. Now, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Members, do any of you have any questions, please? Because I don't see any in the chat boxes yet, but yes, I do now. Councillor Birch, please.
Thank you. My question is more, it's more a query than a question, and it concerns the provisions within the document concerning affordable housing. My question concerns a recent development that consisted of retirement apartments that with over 10 dwellings that was refused by this council, and one of the grounds for refusal was the fact it didn't comply with the JLP provision relating to affordable housing, being Dev 8.3. Prior to the determination of the application, the applicant provided a viability statement that sought to show that there should be a 0 contribution. We as a council commissioned a report and it found otherwise. In other words, that the applicant should make a off-site contribution, and that was a substantial amount. My question is this: is the SPD document that we're being asked to approve this afternoon, is the policies within that document, will it reinforce the current position that that we relied on in rejecting this application, or will it weaken it? I'm just interested in what the thoughts are on that.
Thank you. I'll have a go at answering that, and then I'll ask Richard Grant if he'll fill in any gaps I've left. First of all the allocated sites in the JLP were asked specific questions on viability, and it was established that they could provide 30% affordable housing on those sites. Otherwise, they would not have been included in the JLP. So if they want to deviate from that, they will have to show why and how there has been a really material difference since they gave that assurance as to why they can't provide it now. Now, the application you're talking about was not one of those. This was a speculative, if you like, application, so to speak, but within the town boundary of Totnes, and therefore on a site which in principle was developable. Now, I know, and I expect Richard Grant will know, that these kinds of developers building flats, age-limited retirement flats, do not like providing affordable housing on site. And they would have said they weren't going to provide anything. They would then provide the viability statement, which we would argue with, and we asked them for an off-site contribution. That is the way it goes with those. There have been cases in the courts, they've gone both ways, and sometimes you do manage to get off-site affordable housing out of them. But I think it was a valid reason for refusal, and in this case, and we'll see how it gets on at appeal. But meanwhile, perhaps Mr. Grant, would you like to fill in as to whether the SPD would help? I mean, in my opinion, it's only a material consideration. So in this particular instance, it's probably neither here nor there, but you may have a different opinion. Would you like to say so to members, perhaps?
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. I think, I mean, you've summarised the position very well there. I'm not familiar with the application which has been used as an example, but I think the simple answer is the joint local plan is our basis for decision making. So the policies in the JLP are those that are used in this case and in all cases for making decisions, particularly on viability and making these sort of judgments. The SPD gives further detail as to how those policies will be used. And so therefore, it certainly does not weaken anything in the JLP by any means. In some respects, I would say it gives greater clarity to a developer or a case officer who's looking at these things. And it should therefore mean that these sort of discussions around viability are more informed and our position is made even clearer. I think so. I suppose the answer to your question is it certainly does not weaken it. In some situations, it may well strengthen it, but it certainly would just reinforce the policies in the JLP. The final point just to make, I think, in terms of the point Councillor Pearce has made about this being a speculative application, because the joint local plan sets out that we meet our needs for new homes in full and sets out a very robust supply and a robust 5-year land supply, our approach to these sort of speculative elements can be very robust because they must really be able to meet all of our policy requirements in full in order to be judged to be okay. Otherwise, I think we have a stronger position to refuse these things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Birch?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Councillor Panel, you have a question you wish to ask, please?
I do. Thank you, Chairman. I've got 2 questions, if that's all right.
One at a time.
Well, right, the first one, I have the utmost respect for my fellow members of the Development Management Committee and in the way in which we approach our task of deciding on applications. I wonder if the leader would like to take this opportunity to disassociate herself from the remarks of the business minister, who said the best way to interact with members of their local authority would be to attend a Conservative Party fundraiser. I think that gave all the wrong signals. I have no problem with people attending Conservative Party fundraisers, but I think the suggestion that they could thereby gain influence really should be dismissed. I wonder if she'd like to come on to that one first, please.
Well, Councillor Pannell, I'm not sure that's relevant to the SPD.
I just thought you might like to use this opportunity to uphold our standards, because I'm sure we all uphold them.
Absolutely. I would absolutely say to you that the proverbial, and they were only proverbial then, the proverbial days of the mythical brown envelopes are well over.
Fine, thank you. The second question.
Thank you, Councillor Panel. I don't think we should get involved in politics, really. I think that was totally unnecessary, but carry on. I'll allow you to ask your second question.
Thank you. This is relevant because it's one of the issues that the SPD deals with is protecting our shopping centres. A number of organisations, including the LGA, have written to the Telegraph today saying that the government's proposals to weaken local authorities' powers in matters such as converting shops to homes is going to ride roughshod over communities. My question really is how effective will our local plan and the SPD be in protecting our commercial shopping communities if this suggested alteration to the law goes ahead?
Councillor Pannell, I think it's important. A lot of permitted development is not permitted in conservation areas, and therefore it may not be permitted in a lot of our town centres for that very reason. So until we see the detail of it, I think it's not really very useful to speculate. And again, if Richard Grant would like to add anything, Chairman, I'd be more than happy for him to do so if that's all right with you.
Yeah, yes, thank you. That's fine. Richard Grant, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think I'd second what Councillor Pearce has said there. We don't know the detail of this, and of course we're also seeing the news media outlets telling us about the potential planning policy paper, which could introduce a whole raft of other changes as well. So we are in a little bit of a state at the moment where we're trying to second guess what comes out from government. But I think one observation I would make is clearly the policies in the joint local plan and therefore the guidance in the SPD relate to those occasions where we are being asked to grant consent for a planning application. So those proposals which are coming through from permitted development clearly are not subject in the same way to the policies and the guidance. Having said that, some permitted development does require some form of approval. And as Councillor Pearce has said, some permitted development is not allowable in conservation areas and other areas of restraint. So we need to keep a very close eye on what happens here. And clearly what we'd like to be able to do is ensure that the policies and the strategy in the JLP, which does seek to reinforce and strengthen our town centres, can be applied in full, and that we can use it to support town centres going forwards into the world we are now emerging into.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baldry, you've got comment, please. Is it simply a comment? Because at this moment we're really dealing with questions, but I'll allow you to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a comment on what the leader said in her opening remarks, if I may. So I think it is the right time to do it. I heard what the leader said, and she was totally accurate in what she said about the responses being made to the SPD consultation period. But I would not like people to think that we had totally ignored the consultation. The Liberal Democrats did respond. I have in front of me an email from Councillor Victor Abbott on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group on the 13th of September to Jessica Vaughan, in which we outlined some comments on the SPD. So we did make comments on the SPD, and I would like the record to show that the Liberal Democrat group has made a response. Thank you.
So thank you for that. Councillor Brazil, please. Councillor Brazil,
yeah, thank you. Thank you. Just getting off mute. Yeah,
come on, wake up. Thank you.
Yeah, a few questions.
One at a time. We don't want too many. Come on.
No, okay. 4.23, which talks about housing mix, and it says, and I'm delighted with it. If housing proposals are considered outlined, the delivery of an appropriate housing mix will be conditioned to be considered as part of any reserved matters application. We've just dealt with an application quite recently when we were told that we couldn't deal with housing mix as a reserve matter. So just if we could have some clarification on that. 4.71 deals with thresholds, and it says, it's a typically woolly thing. We'll seek to ensure that the spirit of threshold policies is not. How do we put some, rather than just a few words, how do we actually put some empirical evidence down there I think we need, as far as density or the number of properties on a particular site is concerned. There's one other, I'm trying to find it. Yeah, 7.159, it talks about trees, and in that it's saying that if there's a development going ahead, you have to take into account the trees and etc., which are all very good. But what happens when we find what developers do is that they know that they're going to develop somewhere, so they chop down the trees first and then put the application in. Thank you. Those are my three questions. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want me to answer those, Chairman?
Okay, carry on. Whichever one of you.
Yes, sorry, I'm going to have to go because I was trying to find the tree one, and I'm going to have to go back to 4.23, wasn't it, the first one?
I think that's right. Yes.
Yes, I'll get there in just a second. Hang on.
Okay.
It's not that simple.
It's not that easy, is it? No.
No, it's not, but I'm getting there. I'm nearly there. Wait a minute. 4.23. Yes. Now, this is the outline one. I think, yes, I understand what the question's all about, because I think you're referring in particular, aren't you, Councillor Brazil, to the West Alvington site that we've had up recently. Yeah. The situational outline sites has changed since that was given outline permission in 2015, and we are now allowed to be more prescriptive by condition as to the mix of housing we would expect to see on a site when we grant outline permission, so that when they come back at reserved matters stage, we can be more precise, because we've done the work now and got the evidence to say what we would like to see on the site. So as well as saying what sort of affordable housing we would like to see, and I would suggest we need to say whether we want houses or flats there, we can say what size houses, because I know that everybody's conscious that there are far too many 4-bedroomed houses on that site, and none of us are happy with it, but we are where we are because at the time it wasn't put on the outline permission, but I don't think that will happen in future. So I hope that satisfies you on that. 4.71, I think, is about the division of sites. Now, sometimes you'll find that somebody will come in with a site with 9 houses on it, so they don't have to give any affordable housing on it. And then a couple of years later, they'll pop up with another one that's next door and come up for another 9 houses or something like that. And I think what that's about is we'll say, no, you can't have that as 2 separate sites. Your second site has got to provide affordable housing for 18 houses, not 2 separate 9 ones that you don't provide any affordable housing for. I think that's what it's about, having had a quick look at it. But again, I'd need to get back to it to have a look. But it was 4.71, wasn't it? Yeah, that's the affordable housing threshold. So, and then applications close to the affordable housing threshold will be subject to thorough testing and policy assessment. So again, if you put in an application for 9 houses and we look at the site and say, no, there's plenty of room on there for 10 houses and 3 of them have got to be affordable, that's what we'll do. And I think that's what that policy is saying. Chopping down trees, well, I think that's as life ever was. And if you see a site that looks like a development site and they chop down the trees, that's probably what they're about to do. So, Chairman, can I ask Richard Grant if he wants to add anything for all that, please?
Yes, by all means, bring him in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the 2 points I'd just make, firstly on 4.23, where I think Councillor Pearce is absolutely right in what she said. The SPD actually, I think, also provides with an additional bit of security on the point that Councillor Brazil has raised. I'm just going to quickly try and get back to that so I can remind myself of the wording. But I think if you read what we're saying here, I think in the past there has been a principle that housing mix should be set at outline level when outline applications are received, and there shouldn't then be something which is discussed at reserved matters. What this is saying is that we will condition outlines to say we will be considering housing mix at the reserved matters level, and that enables us to get around that particular legal loophole. So this SPD is trying to put in place something we can use to do that. And the second point on the trees, again, to agree with Councillor Pearce, I think unless a tree obviously is subject to a TPO, then that is something a developer may well choose to do. But of course, if they are shown as part of the application itself to then come across to have done something which is contravening ecology policies, so for example, cutting down trees in a nesting season, these sort of things, I think that can also play quite badly with them when they're being assessed for the detail of their scheme when it comes forwards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Brazil, are you happy with those explanations?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the next speaker I've got is Councillor O'Callaghan, who wants to make a comment, I believe. Councillor O'Callaghan?
Yeah, hi, thank you.
I hope you don't say anything that's already been said. That's all, with reference maybe to the development in Kingsbridge. Thank you.
Well, I made a comment on that, but that's separate to what I am going to say. Yeah, I'm having looked through the comments from the public on all this. I notice on climate change, certainly, there's more than one comment on the fact that developer off-site biodiversity compensation should not be acceptable, and that it shouldn't be a tradable commodity, especially in the light that we've declared a climate emergency. And I think that's something the public is and should be concerned about. And I just having checked back on the, I think it's called the mitigation hierarchy in the document. It talks about on 772, 773 onwards, it talks about compensation being a last resort if the mitigation hierarchy has been applied, and there are residual impacts on biodiversity. Obviously, it says the preference for compensatory habitats features is on-site. However, where this is not practicable, off-site compensation may be considered on a case-by-case basis. It would seem a shame, as I say, as we've declared a climate emergency, that we can't close that loophole altogether, really, because that allows developers a way in to actually not provide on-site gains in biodiversity, and just to mitigate off-site, which is a cop-out, I think, and it is something the public's obviously concerned about and have commented on. So that is something I would like to, that's something I would like to comment on, see if that's something that can be tightened up.
Where's the question, please?
Pardon?
Your question, please.
Well, it was a comment, but my question is, can that be tightened up? The off-site biodiversity compensation should not be acceptable. It says here that it would be a last resort, but I would prefer it if it weren't there at all. I just wonder perhaps if Mr. Grant might have a comment on that.
Thank you. Mr. Grant, would you like to comment on that, please?
I shall do my best, Chair.
Thank you.
I mean, the first point, I suppose, is can that be tightened up? I mean, where we are with the state of the SPD now, unfortunately, the answer is no, because this is the adoption of the SPD, and once we've adopted it, it's then set until it's reviewed. But having said that, and I will put my hand up, I'm not a specialist in these areas by any means, but I think these parts of the SPD are doing two things. One is they're responding directly to the policies in the joint local plan. And so I'd imagine actually if we wanted to tighten up in the way you're describing, that actually is something we need to go through joint local plan policy, not through the SPD, and therefore would need to go into the joint local plan review mechanism when that takes place. And obviously there's a timescale for that, which takes us over several years into the future. But the second thing is as well, I know that a lot of the discussions we had around these parts of the SPD were about the experts in their field trying to find ways to get the most out of national government policy and the PPG, the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework on how these things are set out nationally. And I believe in that context, the principle that at the end of the, if you like, string of actions that can be taken, that a developer is able to provide off-site contributions, off-site mitigation. I believe that's set out in the PPG. So it's not something that unilaterally we could change. We'd be in breach of the national guidance. But I take your point. I know that there's been an awful lot of thought on this from the officers, and we are always looking at how we can make best use of the frameworks that we're given. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Grant. Okay, members, I don't have any more questions on the chat list, so we'll now move on, and I will ask the proposer to propose the recommendation and ask for a seconder, and then we can move into debate. And I would remind you that each member may speak only once. So, Councillor Pearce, would you like to move your recommendation, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So I move the two recommendations on page 19 for this report, that subject to West Devon Borough Council and Plymouth City Council agreeing likewise, which they already have, the Council adopts 1, the Plymouth and South West Devon Supplementary Planning Document as attached at Appendix A, and 2, its 2 companion documents, the Developer Contributions Evidence Base and the Traditional Farm Buildings, their Adaptation and Reuse Barn Guide, included in Appendix A to the report, and in accordance with Regulation 14 of the Town and Country Planning, Local Planning England Regulations 2012 as amended. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded, Chairman.
Thank you. Members, does anyone wish to speak and form part of a debate? Speak, please. Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Hodgson?
Yeah, sorry, it takes a couple of minutes for this to come up. It's not me being slow. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I understand. That's all right. Just as long as you're still there, fine. Thank you.
I was the first here at 1:30. Right, okay. In terms of this SPD, obviously it's completely linked and is designed to link and support the joint local plan. And of course it supports the overall provisions and detail of the joint local plan. It is my experience of the joint local plan coming into force over the last year and has been discussed and looked at, and the policies are being used, that it's really not working for either of the two parishes. The two parishes in my ward, Tartington and Staverton. Both are being squeezed into, delivering the type of developments, in other words, suburban developments in and around the village centres, that are really against the express wishes of both parishioners and the parish councils and the neighbourhood plans they're working on, and making it incredibly difficult for them to deliver neighbourhood plans that could ever be passed or a referendum in locally, because they do not support the organic development in and around the hamlets, which is something, as people will be aware, I've always argued for. And there's actually been the development and the historic development, in fact, probably prehistoric development of this area, to be turning it into suburbia, and to do what's happening now in Dartington, with basically Dartington turning in from a very lovely rural parish with a lovely rural village centre, and all the history of Dartington being allowed to just crash effectively, is breaking the hearts of many people, and I would be doing them no service to support this SPD. Also, I have concerns that it does not go enough to support the climate and biodiversity emergency that we've declared. This is a plan to take us to 2034, which will be simply too late to do anything if we carry on with this. It's actually business as usual. And I think we're giving away, the fact we gave away vast sums of money to second homeowners during the COVID crisis in the last few weeks, I think really speaks volumes about what's going on. I just don't think we're actually really trying to deliver housing for local people to meet local needs. We're constantly oversubscribing. We're going to produce far more housing just because the ONS tells us to. And a lot of those figures go back a few years now. I think we should be reviewing before we take this step forward. I feel very sorry about this SPD. I think it's a real shame. I know a lot of work has gone into it, and I have huge respect for all the officers that have put work into it, as for fellow colleagues in the council. But I just think we really need to look at what we're delivering here, and I think it's not going to work. Thank you. I won't be voting for it.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I have some sympathy with what Councillor Hodgson says, but of course we're being driven by central government on much of it. It's quite clear, in my view, that the way forward with housing is that volume housing should be nationalised, and take the profit out of it, and then we'd actually start building the houses that we need. But that's for another time. The SDP itself, I have to say there are elements of it that I think are very encouraging. But as always, there are then contradictions within the SDP which sort of undo all the good work. And I'll give you two examples. I mean, I've already talked about housing mix. And then, of course, we have 4.20 and 4.22 that basically say, yes, we've agreed what the housing mix should be and we mustn't have these imbalances. And then there we are, 4.20 and 4.22 give the developer perfect ways to try and wriggle out of it. And I just think that's far from giving us clarity. It just gives wriggle room to developers. And I've never known a developer yet to harbour on the side of the good for the community or good for the area, rather on just for profit. That's one example. Another example where we've got excellent. It's fantastic to actually have the genuine definition of what an affordable house is in the South Hams. I think that's at 4.69, and an affordable house in the South Hams is £71,500. That's what it says in this document. That's what an affordable house is, and I applaud that, and I think that's an absolutely great start. And then But then, of course, we have at 4.58, the definition of affordable housing will be as defined by the NPPF, which is not affordable at all. It talks about 20% of open market. That's not affordable. That's just a slightly less expensive house that people in South Hams, normal people in South Hams, still can't afford. And there are a number of examples of that we go through where I feel that the good work is undone, where we try to clarify and strengthen our position. It's then undone by another paragraph that says exactly the opposite. I'm not going to vote against the SDP, because I do feel that it builds on the joint local plan, and there are elements that I think that we can try and argue, hopefully at planning committee and with planning officers, that actually, it may give us some weight, but I'm sceptical and slightly cynical in it. So I'm not going to vote for it, because I refuse to be complicit in defining what is affordable. To tell the British public that you're building an affordable house, which is not affordable, I think is dishonest. And any document that backs that up, to me, is not worthy of being passed, and so I can't support it. Just finally, on Dev 32, which is all about the carbon, I think it is very disappointing, and I understand what officers tell us that we can't make policy up, but I have to say, Dev 32 is about as woolly as a merino sheep, isn't it? It's all about could, would, might be, it'd be marvellous if, but nothing there that will tie people up on, will tie people, which will make developers actually stick to putting in policies that will protect the environment, reduce carbon, etc. And as such, again, so that's more an indication of when the review for the joint local plan comes, and I believe that's in a year or so's time, that's an area where I think we need to massively tighten our policies and remove any wriggle room that developers might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brazil. Well, I think we all know that we could debate affordable housing for a very long time, and what's affordable to you may not be affordable to me, and how do we really put down what is affordable. But I don't think there's any such thing as affordable housing now, and haven't been anything affordable for a very long time. But the next speaker that I've got Councillor O'Callaghan, who has got a comment in here. Do you wish to speak, Councillor O'Callaghan, or not?
No, that was Chairman, right. Just on the Jackie's comments about developers around Dartington.
Okay, fine, thank you. The next speaker is Councillor Chown, and then I will take a couple more, and then I will call upon Councillor Pearce to sum up. So we'll have two more speakers, and then Councillor Pearce will sum up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to reiterate what I put in the comments for the JLP, in that I understand that the SPD is working within the legislative framework, but in order to meet our carbon neutral target, we need to be delivering zero carbon homes immediately. And I understand that we can't do that with the framework that we've got, but I think West Devon, South Hams and Plymouth should be working together to lobby government to really push this. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Smurden, quick comment, please, you've asked for.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd just like to comment and say that I'm really glad to see the adoption within the SPD of the recognition of the special area, South Hams special area of conservation for the greater horseshoe bats. A large proportion of our South Brent ward is a very important feeding and breeding ground for the greater horseshoe bats, and I welcome the work which has gone into this by both Southampton, Dartmoor National Park, Torbay Council, Teignbridge, and I think Devon, and I'm very pleased to see it there. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for that. Councillor Long, the last speaker, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I am pleased to see this document, despite, as has been identified, there are flaws in it. With any document of this size, there certainly will be. I think we will see the flaws being tested as we go forward. And I like, what I really will be pleased with is in the application of this document, that it will prove its worth working with the JLP and with neighbourhood plans. Hopefully we will have a strong suite of documents to be able to shape planning in the South Hams going forward. I have to say that I am particularly pleased, as I have an interest in this area, on the specific section on trees, hedgerows and woodland. Many of the past concerns have been covered on this, and it's good to see that we give some strength in there to deal with this. But again, it will be tested in the application, and I think this is where those on DM committee, but every single councillor, will have to make sure that they try and use this document, the JLP and neighbourhood plans, to shape their communities. And obviously clearly identify any flaws that there are in this, any concerns we have, and when we have an opportunity to revise it, review and change it, that we do so, but strengthen it. And can I just say that, as you said, Chairman, we could debate affordability going forward for ages, but I think there is still remains a big issue on that, even with this document. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that, Councillor Long. Yes, I do agree with quite a bit of what you've said. Now I'm going to move back to Councillor Pearce to wind up the debate, please. Councillor Pearce.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Well, what I'll try and do is just respond to some of the remarks that have been made. First of all, Councillor Hodgson. I think we're all aware, Councillor Hodgson, that you are not in favour of the 2 sites in Dartington. But I think you've been notified today that Baker Estates are starting to engage with local populations. So now is your time to engage with Baker Estates and to try and make those 2 developments what you and the people of Dartington would like to see. I do think that it's a slightly cheap jibe, actually, to talk about second homeowner grants when we were given the money by the government, and all we have been is the messenger in this. They sent it with a pack of instructions, and we have obeyed the instructions, and we had no other way of doing that, except perhaps not looking terribly hard for second homeowners when we were given a long list of ones that the officers couldn't find. To Councillor Brazil, yes, thank you for finding this encouraging, this document. You will note that in 458, affordable housing is written with inverted commas around it. So I think officers recognise that the definition, well, when planning policy talks about affordable housing, I think we all recognise that what the government, what the national expression of affordable housing, what they call affordable housing, no longer is affordable. But as I understand it, that definition of affordable housing was decided in the courts in about 1997, if I'm right, by one Judge Boggis, but you can pull me up on that if I'm wrong. Then there were some remarks on the carbon policies. You may not think the carbon policies are wonderful, but I think actually they're quite strong compared with other people's local plans. The proof of the pudding will be in the eating, and definitely at revision stage, if we want to make them stronger, then we will. But I think it would have been very difficult to say that we were going to deliver 0 carbon houses when we were preparing the JLP, because I expect that the inspector would have thrown it out because the houses would have been too expensive for developers to develop, and they wouldn't therefore have passed the test that we required to say they could deliver 30% affordable housing, and there would have been big rows and non-delivery, and then we wouldn't have a 5-year land supply, and so really we wouldn't be much further forward. Then there were a few remarks about bats from Councillor Smurden. I think I've heard those before, but you're welcome to make them again. And thank you, Councillor Long, for being on the whole complimentary about the plan. So if there are no more questions, Chairman, I suppose we can pass to the vote now.
Thank you very much. So I'll call in Mr. White. Darryl, can you please proceed to the vote?
Thank you very much, Chair. So again, for those watching the live stream, we have 28 members in attendance and we'll be taking the vote in alphabetical order. Councillor Abbott?
For.
Councillor Austin?
For.
Councillor Baldry?
For.
Councillor Bastone?
For.
Councillor Birch?
For.
Councillor Brazil?
Abstain.
Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Chown?
For.
Councillor Foss?
For.
Councillor Hawkins?
For.
Councillor Hodgson?
Against.
Councillor Holway?
For.
Councillor Hopwood?
For.
Councillor Long?
For.
Councillor May?
For.
Councillor McKay?
For.
Councillor O'Callaghan?
For.
Councillor Pannell?
For.
Councillor Pearce?
For.
Councillor Pennington?
For.
Councillor Pringle?
For.
Councillor Reeve?
For.
Councillor Rose?
Abstain.
Councillor Rosa?
For.
Councillor Sweet?
I'm going to abstain.
And Councillor
Abstain.
Taylor?
For.
Thank you, members. That is therefore 24 votes in favour with 1 against and 3 abstentions, and that vote is therefore declared carried. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. White. So we now move on to item 7, which is climate change and biodiversity strategy and action plan update. And I will ask Councillor Pearce to introduce this item, please. Thank you, Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You're all aware that the Council declared a climate change and biodiversity emergency in July last year and committed to develop an action plan. The draft plan was subsequently adopted on December the 19th, and Council resolved to develop a strategy framework and consult on the plan, come back in 6 months. So this is what we're doing. But the COVID-19 pandemic has meant that officer and member resources have been focused on the Council's response phase to the emergency, that is the COVID emergency, the provision of support to residents and businesses, and work has been held up by this. I think there is no doubting that. There haven't been it's been difficult to hold working group meetings. We've had one, but for a couple of months it was impossible to hold any meetings. And in view of this, the report recommends amended timelines for the completion of some elements of the work, while seeking members' views on the draft strategy. And it's important now to highlight the correlation between the Council's emergency recovery and renewal plans and the draft climate change and biodiversity strategy. It's envisaged that these areas of work will converge over time, both locally and nationally, as part of a wider green recovery. And I think it is very encouraging that people really are thinking that a green recovery is the way to go. So further work is needed to finalise the draft strategy and consider and incorporate, where relevant, the consultation responses. And it's proposed that we should therefore bring it back to you again on the 24th of September for adoption. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. So questions, please. The first one I've got is from Councillor Rose. Please, Councillor Rose.
Thank you. I think I understood that correctly there, from what Councillor Pearce just said, that the draft recovery plan, which goes alongside the climate and biodiversity action plan in creating a green recovery, is still being completed, and then that will come back to us for adoption. Is it possible to have another stage of member involvement, perhaps once the draft is completed, for that to be circulated, and then there be a workshop so that members can input in kind of between the completion of the draft and the adoption? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I'm sure there will be opportunities for member input. We shall invite that, and there will be at least one further meeting, I'm sure, of the working group before we get to that stage. And all members, as you know, are welcome to attend virtually, probably, and have your input. And if you can't attend, then send your questions or comments in.
Thank you for that. Anyone else who wishes to ask a question, or did you wish to continue, Councillor Rose?
If I could just clarify that.
Yeah, sure. Carry on.
In particular, the point I was also interested in is could the draft be circulated to all members once it's completed, so that we would have time to look over it in our own time? I'm aware that, for example, if just attending the climate change meeting, if you haven't had the time to really look over it, then it can be a bit confusing. So if that point could be clarified, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, you will have a draft, and in particular, the draft will be going to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, of which you're a member, and it will be up to the Overview and Scrutiny then to recommend any changes they want to be made to the Executive.
Members, does anyone else wish to ask a question, please?
Hang on, Madam Chairman, I've just had a thought. I'm not sure that what I've said is right. I'm thinking of the recovery plan, which will be going to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So we will definitely, if this one doesn't go to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, we will definitely circulate it to members for comments.
Yeah, I think that members will want to have an input, so I think that would be a good idea. Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to ask a question? No? So if all the questions have been asked, then recommendation proposed. Councillor Pearce, can you propose your recommendation?
Yes, I will. And just before I do, I would like to make it clear to members that recommendation 4, there was a considerable amount of conversation, shall we say, between members of the climate change working group to get this as it now appears. So I hope there won't be any further amendments on that. But the recommendations are that Council has recommended 1, that the progress on the development of the draft climate change and biodiversity strategy be noted. 2, that the feedback from the consultation and the draft action plan exercise undertaken in Q4 of 2019 to 20 is noted. And 3, that the climate change and biodiversity working group be requested to update the strategy and action plan in light of the consultation responses and back to Council on the 24th of September 2020. And 4, the correlation between the Council's climate change and biodiversity strategy and the emerging recovery and renewal plans be recognised, and that in developing and implementing its plans, including working towards a resilient, green and sustainable economy, it will engage with local businesses, organisations and residents. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you for that. Now, apparently I might have jumped the gun because I've got 4 people at least who still want to speak on the item. I may need to take advice from Mr. White.
Thank you, Chair. Down the conversation bar, there is a mix of question requests and speak requests. There's certainly question requests from Councillors Sweet and Mackay, and Councillor Hodgson's asked to speak, as has Councillor Birch. So there are 2 requests for questions and 2 requests to take part in the debate. So if you are agreeable, Chair, maybe will be opportunity to take the questions first, and then we'll go into debate.
Can we continue? Because they were a bit slow on typing in the fact that they wanted to speak or whatever, and it didn't actually come to my notice. Maybe they'd already put it in there, but it didn't get to my notice. So shall I start then with Councillor Birch?
I want to.
Who wishes to propose a motion?
No, can I think there are 2 members who wish to ask a question. Shouldn't they go before?
Do you want me to? You're happy for me to do that, right? Okay.
I think it's right and proper. You deal with the questions before I speak.
Okay. Well, I wanted to make sure I did it in the right order, which is before me. And if you're happy with that, that's fine. So I'll move to Councillor Sweet, and then it will be Councillor Mackay, followed by Councillor Hodgson, and then yourself. Yes.
Could I think it's Councillor Sweet, Councillor Mackay, and then I speak and propose an addition, and that will be followed by Councillor Hodgson.
Okay, right, fine. Thank you. I'll take your advice. So, Councillor Sweet then.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Pearce answered part of my question. I just wanted to sort of be clarified of that timeline, actually. So I think it comes back to full council on the 24th of September. What's the date of the next climate change emergency working group? And can we have at least a week to review the draft before that next meeting, please? Before the 24th, before the full council. So do you know what the date is of the climate change emergency?
Chairman, can we ask Mr. Parle if he's got any
yeah, sure.
dates, or Mr. White?
Could we have some advice, please, to when the meeting's
Thank you,
likely
Chairman.
to be? Okay.
It's Drew here. I'll have to defer to Mr. White as to whether we've set that next date, but certainly we can have a meeting sooner rather than later to ensure that members have an opportunity to see the strategy. There is a fair bit of work still to do on it, so it is a question of trying to fit that in between now and the 24th of September. But I can't recall whether a date has been set as yet, and whether Mr. White can clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. If I can, through you, Chair, we haven't actually fixed the date in there, but it will certainly be in the upcoming weeks.
Thank you. And can we make sure that all members get wind of it, that they know when it's going to be, please? Fine, thank you.
And that there's due time to kind of have that response time between the draft coming out and the vote on the 24th would be really great. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Councillor Mackay, please.
Yes, it's along the similar lines with regard to timescales. Is our officers going to be engaging with external groups like Extinction Rebellion, who have put together, I'm sure you're aware, and it's been circulated, a very comprehensive answer to the council's own action plan. It's a very professionally produced document, and it makes some very good points about metrics and all sorts of things that need to be considered and targets. Will the council be engaging with them and other groups prior to producing a document for consideration in September?
Who would like to answer that one?
Chairman, would you like me to pick this one up?
Yes, sure.
I think first of all a comment around what we've received in the consultation responses, and I would agree that the response from Extinction Rebellion and other organisations have been very helpful, very comprehensive, and there's a lot of good information in there. At this stage, we're trying to run the line between producing our plan, which covers elements of our own operational carbon footprint, and the wider plan, which is looking out at the 2050 aim for making the whole district carbon net zero. That has to be done in conjunction with the Devon Carbon Plan, because the majority of the actions are not within our gift on our own. So at this stage, our proposal will be to develop the rest of our framework to bring back to members. It will be a living document, and from that we will distill down, hopefully, the key actions we need to take over time. And I think part of that at that stage will be then we'll consult with external partners to support delivery of those actions. I think it's important to mention that this is our plan at the moment, and we're one of many parties involved, and the community, in terms of behavioural change, local actions, are going to be absolutely vital. And part of the strategy will be to consult with the public. I do not, and the groups you mentioned, Councillor Mackay. At this stage, if we go through that process now, then we're not going to get anything in place to bring to members on the 24th of September. So it is a question of doing the right things at the right time, as I've stated in the report.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that, Drew. That is very informative. Councillor Mackay, does that answer your questions? Are you happy with that explanation?
As an explanation, I fully understand it. Although, but I do dispute some of the assumptions made in it.
Okay, so can I move on to the next
I'm not allowed to finish, am I not?
Well, I think you've said enough and we get the gist of where you're going, so that's fine. Can we move on then? I think the next person who was on the list who I said could speak next is, going backwards, is Councillor Birch. Is that correct?
Yes, okay.
Okay, Councillor Birch.
Thank you. I'm addressing the recommendation that is before. I'm just trying to find my paperwork. 1 second. I'm addressing the recommendation that is before members, and can I just say that I fully support what is set out at 1 to 4 of the recommendation, and in particular I'd like to thank Councillor Pearce for taking such a positive approach in respect of seeking to come up with a way forward in respect of item 4. So I certainly will be supporting the recommendation at 1 to 4. However, I think that there should be 2 additions to the recommendation, and that is why I'd like to propose an addition. Now, I have actually sent by email to Mr. White the proposed additions. I don't know whether it's possible for him to put that on the screen, but if it's not, then I will perhaps give it some explain in greater detail. What we need to bear in mind is this, is that it's now nearly a year since we as a council declared an emergency, and unfortunately there are quite a few people within the community who have got the impression that we are not actually treating this as an emergency. Now, there are factors that have made it difficult for us to move as fast as we would like, but I think what we need to remember is that we did declare an emergency and we need to treat this as an emergency. We as a council have received lots of praise for the way that we have responded to the COVID-19 crisis. And what is coming to me as a member is that why can't we treat the climate change emergency in a similar manner, especially when one sits in front of the BBC News last night and the headline is about the immediate problems arising from climate change. So I think that it's important that we as a council address this emergency in the same manner that we've addressed the COVID-19 crisis. Now, at the working group, we were informed that there were 15 responses in the consultation, and those are actually listed at Appendix 1 to the report. So what in fact is then reported at 4.5, I think it is, of the report, it says, it is recognised that the consultation was limited in format and that the period coincided in part with the COVID-19 pandemic. Further consultation with the community as a whole and or specific sectors will be needed as actions and options are developed. And the report also seems to indicate that although these consultations have been received, they've not been at the moment taken on board, and that is an action that needs to be taken. Prior to this meeting, I've received several emails from groups and from individuals who have expressed concern at the fact that we're not treating this as an emergency, and that they believe that the response to the consultation that was submitted has not been recognised as a valid addition to our proposal. And I think that it's in order to show faith in the way that the consultation is recognised, you'll see that I've added at item 5 a proposed addition, And the proposed addition is that the consultees, bearing in mind we're talking about 15, I'm referring to the consultees who responded, and that is the 15 listed at Appendix A, that the consultees or their representatives be invited to address the climate change and biodiversity working group by means of a remote meeting within the next 4 weeks. The meeting be subject to a protocol which provides for each address to be no longer than 5 minutes, bearing in mind that they will have submitted their responses in writing, but I think we ought to offer them the opportunity to address the working group, albeit for a period of 5 minutes, so that they can emphasize the important parts of their submission to us. And I think that would, by reaching out to the community, and especially those who went to all the trouble to respond, I think this is the minimum we can do to recognise the contribution they're making. So that is the reason I am proposing that as an addition to items 1 to 4. And there is also a further addition at item 6. The further addition at item 6 is a matter that I raised at the working group, and that the climate change emergency and the measures that we're going to introduce are going to have a long-term effect for all of us, and in particular those who are a lot younger than the members of the working group. I'm not being ageist or anything like that, but I think the age profile of the working group needs to be lowered because it is their future more than ours. And therefore, the proposal I'm making is that the membership of the Climate Change and Biodiversity Working Group be extended to 8 members, with Councillor Rose being nominated by the opposition group, and the other member to be nominated by the Conservative group. So I'd like to propose that as an addition or stroke amendment to the recommendation. But as I said at the beginning of this, I wholeheartedly support items 1 to 4, but I think if the addition of 5 and 6, then it shows a positive response by this council to this emergency. Thank you.
Thank you. Getting a bit lost now, I have to admit. I've got Councillor Pearce. Should I bring you in?
Sorry, Chair, at this point, to have the amendment on the table to be debated, we need a seconder.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. White, can you advise me, please?
The state of play is, Chair, we have the recommendation which was proposed by Councillor Pearce and seconded by Councillor Bastone, parts 1 to 4 on the screen in black font. Subsequent to that, now we've had 2 additions which we will now treat as an amendment, parts 5 and 6, and they're shown in red font. They've just been seconded by Councillor Hodgson, so we're now on the debate on the amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So, members, can I ask anyone who would like to speak on the amendment, please?
I've been down to speak about 5 minutes ago.
Okay, well, you can speak next then. Carry on, Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to second the amendment. I wholeheartedly support this. I think it's really important that we've actually managed to solicit so much active interest from key groups that have, as we know, taken their thoughts and their sort of protest to London, and are also able to clearly focus and take the time to look at what proposals are coming up from local authorities in the area. So I think it's really important that we perhaps have the opportunity to invite them in and have those conversations. I think they would welcome it, and I think it would really help inform our understanding. So that's the first point of the amendment. And the second point regarding Councillor Rose, of course, I absolutely welcome this. I think, I mean, some members might remember, actually, in fact, when we first set up this working group, I did ask if 2 extra seats could be put on then, one for Councillor Chown and one for Councillor Rose. Now, Councillor Chown, I know, has perhaps other commitments, but I know Councillor Rose is keen to join, and I think that would be an excellent addition if we can have at least him and ideally another person, because I think there's a wide interest anyway from within the council. So I think the more that we have, and the wider, more diverse understandings of what's needed to happen, I think the better. But just on top of that, I would say that Sorry, it's my phone going off. I would also say that I think I welcome the fact that we're going to give a little bit more time to this, because I think we really need to make very sure that we do have that merging of how we're going forward with recovery from COVID, at the same time looking at the climate emergency. And in fact, there's so much potential overlap in terms of how behaviour change has responded very positively towards COVID. I think we can capture a lot of the benefits of that as we go forward now with the climate emergency. So I think it's all to be welcomed. So yes, I'm quite happy for us to take a little bit more time, but not too much time, because obviously it is an emergency, but I think it's important we get it right as well. And I also welcome what work has been done to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I'm wary of the fact that members want things done ASAP, but on the other hand, I'm concerned about our staff, and if we have the staff to cope with all the work that we're asking them to do, which I think that might be a problem for us. Mr. White, can I ask you, please, who is the next person who would like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Pearce has asked to raise a point of order, so she should procedurally go next. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Pearce then, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, my point of order is that, and this is purely a point of order. It's not on the subject matter of point 5 recommendation. That was not discussed by the Climate Change Working Group, and therefore is the Climate Change Working Group able to make that recommendation to Council?
Thank you. Who would like to answer that one, please?
I can, Chair, through you.
Thank you.
In effect now, because we've got a proposal which has been seconded on the day of the report recommendation, that has in effect superseded the working group's recommendation. So Councillor Pearce has recommended parts 1 to 4. Now it's a matter of council to determine, and 2 members of council proposed and seconded 2 additions. So it'd be my advice that is in order. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, may I come back then?
Yes, you can, certainly.
So may I propose amendments to the amendments then, please?
Yes.
No, Chair. Sorry, Chair.
We
should
can't
deal with
do
one.
that. We have to debate one at a time, don't we?
We do. Thank you, Chair.
So if we're going to debate the amendment, how do I get an amendment to the amendment in before it's voted on?
You would need, Chair, to get the proposal of the amendments and the seconder's agreement.
Fine. Okay, so shall I will therefore ask Councillor Birch and Councillor Hodgson if they would agree to that.
Well, I don't know what the proposed amendment is to the amendment, so I can't consider it.
Well, I hadn't seen your amendment, so I didn't know I was going to propose an amendment to it.
Well, actually, I didn't even know there were going to be amendments. We hadn't had.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what my amendments are, because I don't think you'll object to them, Councillor Birch. First of all, in number 5, it says within the next 4 weeks. Now, given that the next 4 weeks involves 2 weeks in the month of August when we don't normally have meetings, and we are still only meant to be having emergency meetings, I would ask your indulgence to make that 6 weeks to give officers time to arrange it. That's the first thing. And in number 6, we would like to you.
Yes, 6 weeks. Yes, I have no problem with that, subject to Councillor Hodgson agreeing, and also in 6. Again, no problem, subject to Councillor Hodgson agreeing.
Right, thank you very much.
I'm fine with that. Yeah, I agree. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. White, who is down to speak next, please? Because I've lost my conversation panel.
The next speaker, Chair, is he's looking down the list. Councillor Mackay.
Okay, Councillor Mackay then, please. Thank you.
Oh God. Well, I was really speaking. It's disappeared. Oh, it's come back. To support both 5 and 6. I mean, when I asked my question earlier, it was rejected on the grounds of the consultation was rejected on the grounds of OSIFA resources, and I don't really think that is an issue here. Inviting these groups in to talk to the Climate Change and Biodiversity Working Group would be a very simple exercise, and it would give us a chance to enter into a dialogue with these people and also to engender confidence. We've talked a lot about the reputation of the council in various working groups just recently. I think this will go a long way towards rebuilding confidence outside in the community as to what's going on within the council with regard to climate change. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. And then I believe the next speaker probably is Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say, very happy to be nominated to serve on that Climate Change and Biodiversity Working Group. Thank you.
And then Councillor Chan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't know if it is possible to do so in an informal way, but we have invested in a climate emergency officer, Adam Williams, I believe. So in terms of engaging with the South Hams community in an informal way, could he kind of fulfill that role and be a link between the council and the community?
Who would like to answer that question? Perhaps Mr. Powell, would you be able to answer that?
Yes, Chair, certainly. I certainly see that a key part of Adam's role going forward. You know, we're really pleased to have Adam in full time now supporting the agenda and being that contact point between parishes, towns, community groups will be a key part of his role, and that will then feed into the plans as we move forward. So yeah, no problem at all there, Chair. Thank you.
Great. So would he be able to go and speak to parish councils, etc.?
Chair, certainly. I think obviously we have to manage that time, but I think if we've got remote meetings, that makes it easier. And perhaps if we can cluster together in town and parishes into groups, perhaps that would be an easier way. But certainly that would be part of our way forward. Yes.
I think that would be good because that would then get people from in our parishes and villages who have a keen interest in this subject to be able to contribute to the final plan. I will then ask the next speaker, which is Councillor Sweet, please.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I'm really happy to support this. It feels a bit of a no-brainer, really. I think there's, so much work our officers are doing, so much work that's gone into the working groups. And I just think sometimes it's really difficult to convey that to the like massively interested parties who have also put together so much work and are commenting and engaging with this. So it feels like a courtesy to them, but I think actually just, as John Butch and Jack have laid out, just 5 minutes to speak. I think that what they could actually gain from listening into the working group and seeing that process working would be massively invaluable, and I think would actually be sort of a great comfort. Because, we are in an emergency and we've dealt with an emergency, and, even some of this wording, in point 2.8 and 5.4 of the introduction sort of talks about the green recovery and moving towards. And I think, we need to be looking at those things that work fantastically within our emergency over the last few months and really sort of engage with that process as well. So, yeah, I think them listening as well as participating will be, really, really beneficial on every level. And yeah, I'd definitely support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Councillor Rose to speak, and then we will move on from there. So, Councillor Rose, please.
Just a very brief one. Thank you, Chair. Just to say, fully support all of this, and thank you to John and Jackie for that nomination. Really look forward. I think that there's so much potential that we have to engage with the problems creatively, because there's a lot of doom and gloom. I mean, for me, I'm genuinely, if the scientists are correct, there might not be a world for my children, which is very, very emotive. It's why I became a councillor. It was to put this work in. So I'm really, happy with this recommendation, and I hope it passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. So, guide me, Darryl. Do I then move back to Councillor Birch as he added to the recommendations to ask him if he would like to speak again?
On an amendment, Chair, you don't get the right to reply at the end.
No, right.
But having said that, it might ease the debate in the meeting. Councillor Pearce did suggest an amendment to this amendment. So if Councillors Pearce and Bastone are willing to accept this amendment, it may well negate the need for a separate vote, and we'll just go straight into the substantive motion, Chair.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Pearce and Councillor Bastone, are you able to agree to the additional?
We will accept the amended amendments, Chairman.
Thank you. So,
did you notice that, Chairman? The leader spoke on behalf of me. I have got my own voice.
No, you
haven't. You've got a voice. You can agree. You can agree or disagree.
I agree. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. White, we can now move to the vote. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. We can, and I get a sense
you.
from you, Chair, but I mean, I don't get a feel for much opposition to these recommendations. So, if you're happy, we can do this one by exception.
Yes, that would be good.
Or before we do, Chair, I just see Councillor Brazil's registered to speak.
Councillor Brazil, what did you wish to add, please?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I did put down to speak on the substantive on the first motion, and then the amendments came in, so I was a bit sort of pulled out. But just to say that I'm pleased to hear that we're going to get it's going to come forward again.
My concern is the longer we leave it,
looks
like we're not
talking, or someone's talking.
At the same time, what we don't want great big bailiffs suddenly arriving at the top of the hill, and there's only 5.
That's better. Yeah.
We're not at the top of the hill. We're down the other side now. Thank you. Carry on. That's what I could hear. Thank you.
No, all right. Yeah. No. Sorry about that, Rose. No, it's a bit off-putting having someone else talking there. Yeah. You know, I think this is moving forward somewhat slowly, but in the end, you know, matters did kind of go out of our hands a bit with the pandemic and etc. So I think the representations I've had, and I agree with them, a lot of them, is that mainly that we need to start putting dates, costings, carbon savings, making the plan a lot more smart targets to it. And I think that we need to be slightly wary that we don't spend our whole time discussing who we're going to consult, what they're going to say, then how we're going to do that in the end it's an emergency. We've got to get on and do something. It's not rocket science, if you don't excuse a pun. We know what we need to do, and I just think we need to get on and do it, and not faff around too much in trying to get a 100% consensus among the community, because we're not going to get that. I think as we're elected as councillors, we've got to take decisions. We know what we need to do. Let's just get on and do it.
Thank you for that. So now we'll move to the vote, and Darryl was saying that carry on, Darryl. You say what you were going to say.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not picking up in the debate any members indicating a wish to either abstain or vote against the now substantive motion as per the screens, which is 6 parts, Chair. So I'd recommend that we vote on this one by exception. So if members aren't willing to accept the recommendation, to let us know in the chat bar on the left-hand side.
Thank you. So members, you've heard what Mr. White has said, and if anyone wishes to vote otherwise, we will assume that everyone is in favour of it, and we'll move on to the next item.
Jason is unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
Very good, thank you. So then we'll move on to item 8, which is the revised political composition of the council. And Councillor Pearce is going to introduce this report. Councillor Pearce, please. Councillor Pearce, please.
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry, didn't realise.
Right.
Yeah, this report, and I'm not blaming Councillor Sweet in any way at all, because she can do what she likes to do. But the report has been caused by her decision to leave the Green Party and to become an independent, and therefore there are implications which are put up in the revised recommendations that you have in front of you, and also explained in the appendix which you have before you, which is the revised political balance table. Now, I'm not sure that that is the correct political balance table.
You've done it all wrong down here. You've disconnected everything.
Oh, I think Councillor Pannell's got a problem. Could you mute yourself, Councillor Pannell, please?
No, you're not supposed to unplug that.
Right. Am I right in thinking?
It's not me, Leader.
It isn't you. Oh, sorry. I thought it sounded like you. I beg your pardon.
It might be Councillor Smurden from what's being said.
Okay, it is. Darryl, do we need a revised grid there showing what the implications are now that the independents, I understand, have actually formed a group?
That's correct, Chair. So the appendix has been superseded in effect, but the bottom line,
yes.
The bottom line is those 3 recommendations that are on the screen are accurate and concurrent with political balance implications, Chair.
Fine. Okay. Well, I have very little to say about this. I think there's very little we can do about it. So probably, unless there are any questions, we could just get on and move the recommendations, Madam Chairman. But I don't know if anybody's got any questions.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions, members?
As a member, Councillor Pennington, as a member, I will be part of that little group. But could I just raise something that that little group may or may not want, because I haven't had time to put it to them yet, with regards to the lockdown, which is just about virtually ended. Now the thing is that I want to move that we consider going back to normality, democratic normality, meetings for the next meeting on the 24th of September, which by that time the lockdown will be probably no longer, and so on. And I say this because it seems to me undemocratic to act as we're acting now in many ways, more ways than one, because the thing is that the lockdown now allows people to go into public houses. It allows them to go into all the shops. It allows already people to go into cafes and so on and so forth in the House of Commons. And it just seems to me now, and the members of the public, of course, are excluded from council meetings at the moment, not like they were before we had this lockdown. And it seems to me, therefore, that we should consider going back to the proper democratic meetings at our meeting next time on the 24th of September. Let's get back to normality and so on. And this is what the Prime Minister has been saying too, and so on and so forth. And therefore, I am proposing that we consider going back to a full democratic meetings for the next full council meeting, as we used to do, where members of the public can come in and members of the public can also speak and so on. Let's get back to it now and not just go on like this, because this is not democratic anymore. And I'm going to propose that, and I would like, if I can, a second, and I would like a recorded vote.
Thank you, Councillor Pennington, for what you've said. I'm sure that quite a few of us do agree with you, but unfortunately I'm not sure that it's possible, and I think you've proposed it. I'm not sure that this is the place where it should be proposed within these recommendations.
Chairman, could I assist here,
yes, please?
Catherine Bowen. We cannot make that decision today, Chairman, because there are a lot of matters to consider about coming out of lockdown, and we're not at that stage yet. We have a recovery plan for getting back to the office in time, but today is not an appropriate time to make that decision. It would not be informed, Chairman.
Thank you. So could perhaps Councillor Pennington could speak with you at some point. May that help?
Certainly, Chairman.
Thanks very much.
So you're excluding that, are you, from this meeting?
Yes.
No longer do we have democracy. It's gone.
Well,
I'm sorry to have to say, there's only local government that's now going to be tied up. All the other organisations are going to be able to meet and be free and speak, including the House of Commons. Oh, no. They're meeting there. We are being penalised.
No, they are not. They are meeting. They are having hybrid meetings where so many of them are allowed in, and the rest are on Skype or whatever, the same as we are. There are very few MPs who are actually allowed into the chamber, but we have been operating like this because this is the only way we can at present, because of social distancing, etc. And if we met in the council chamber, there wouldn't be sufficient space, and the public wouldn't be able to come in, and we can't exclude the public, whereas the public can join us on YouTube, with all our meetings are being recorded and available for people to be able to see our meetings. So actually, no, I've lost my login too. Can you still hear me, members?
Can I ask a question from something you've just said?
Yes.
Have we taken measurements in the council chamber, which is a big council chamber, so that we can still be a metre apart from each other? Have we done that? Has that been done?
Councillor Pennington, I think I've got to stop you there, because that's really not within this item 8 of the council agenda. That's a separate issue. That's a separate issue. So if we could just deal with this item which is before us. I've lost my mod.dov completely, but I've still got the agenda item 8 before me. So Darryl, I guess we
Can I help, Chair?
Yes, please.
We've got, again, the indications on the left-hand side. That we have got.
Right.
If we're taking questions first, there's Councillor Hopwood is the first member on the conversation chat to ask, wish to ask a question.
I did put further down, Chairman, that I cancelled my request to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. And after that, we've got Councillor Foss.
I think, Chair, in terms of the next steps, questions have finished. So we have a proposal moved and seconded, then we can get into the debate, because some members have asked to start with Councillor Sweet, have asked to comment.
Okay, so Councillor Sweet, please.
Hi, thank you, and thank you to everybody for bearing with this agenda item. Thanks, Trevor, Councillor Pennington, for your comments. I think all of us want to get back to meeting in person, certainly in some shape or form. So, I'm hoping that we can at least get back to some kind of hybrid meeting, if not full meetings, by the end of September. I just wanted to clarify that I'm actually still a member of the Green Party, but I'm just not currently a member of the Green Group. And I really look forward to continuing to working with the Green Group and to, with all members. And yeah, thanks again for this agenda item. Thank you.
Councillor Foss, please.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Well, I think that some of our councillors, including Councillor Pennington, ought to be wary of the fact that they are quite vulnerable to this disease, and there is quite a strong hint that we're going to get a second bubble in a minute. If you listen to the news, they're talking big numbers in the winter if we get it wrong, and I don't want to do anything that could add to that problem. We're all being pretty sensible at the present time, and the very fact that people can listen into what we're saying, and I have a lot of time for Councillor Pennington, but I think he's totally wrong when he said it's undemocratic. Part of his issue, and I'm perhaps getting a bit personal, is because he's not using this equipment like we do. So he feels excluded, and I'm sorry that that's the case, but as far as I'm concerned, it's as democratic as we can be. In fact, we all need to have a pat on our own backs because we've carried on with normal business within a very, very difficult period. And I think we've done an exceptionally good job of keeping the general public informed and are making as many sensible decisions as we possibly can at this time. But for me, it's far too early to talk about going back into the chamber.
Councillor Foss, you are correct. Can I then ask Councillor Pearce, who apparently says, can I respond, please? Yes, Councillor Pearce?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It was really what Councillor Pennington was saying, but I think it's mostly been said. I think the problem we've got is that social distancing in the council chamber would be extremely difficult. And as Councillor Foss has said, even if we did start holding meetings back at Fullerton House, there would be a number of members who, for various reasons, would not be able to join us. because they need to shield either themselves or other members, and therefore we would have to find some hybrid way of holding meetings if we did go back. So really at the moment, for the majority of members, this is the best way, but actually it's not part of what we're meant to be talking about, so I'll shut up now.
No, you're absolutely right, Councillor Pearce. Thank you for that. I've got Councillor Abbott who's saying yes. Richard, what did you mean by that, Councillor Abbott? Do you wish to speak?
Nothing of significance, Rose. You can keep going. Leave me.
Thank you. Councillor Pannell, next then, please.
As we are talking about this subject, can I have clarification? I don't think we're allowed to have hybrid meetings at the moment, and if not, it would exclude certain members of the council from being able to attend such a meeting.
Okay, right. So that's that one. And the last one is Councillor Austin.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think a lot of us have a lot of sympathy with Councillor Pennington when he's talking about trying to get back to normal and return to the way things were done in the past. But I did mention this in a meeting yesterday. I will say it again, that if we do look at any form of returning back to physical meetings in future, I don't actually think Follerton House is the right place for us to meet anyway, because I think we need a place with much more space and a much more larger venue in order to encourage social distancing.
Thank you. Councillor Hotwood, perhaps you'd like to wind up as the last speaker. Thank you.
Thank you for making me be the last speaker, because we are going way off the mark on this.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. So can we then take the vote then, please, on this recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. Once again, I don't think anyone's necessarily indicated a wish to vote against the recommendation as per the screens. So I think, as per the previous item, Chair, if no members wish to speak to vote either against or abstain on this one, we'll assume that it's carried. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Mr. White. So then we will move on to the last item that I've got, which is report of bodies. So the first one is the overview and scrutiny panel, which met on the 27th of February, which seems like it was in another world from where we are now. Councillor Birch, would you like to present these minutes, please?
Yeah, I move minutes of the meeting of the overview and scrutiny panel held on the 27th of February. I haven't got numbered pages, so I'll do my best so that you can recognise the document I'm referring to. So the first page, the second page with the heading Executive Forward Plan, the next page with D, Community Development and Outreach at the top. Next, it was then resolved that the panel 1 thanked Fusion. Next, it was then resolved that the panel note. Next, in discussion, a member repeated his previously raised concerns. Next, annual panel work programme. And that's it. I move the minutes.
Thank you for that, Councillor Birch. Then we'll move on. That's to be noted. We'll then move on to the next item, the executive report on the 18th of June. Councillor Pearce to present these minutes, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, this was one of our earlier remote meetings. So page 545, page 546, page 547, page 548, and then there is a recommendation to Council on page 549, which is regarding the business case, which was contained, I think, in exempt Appendix A. So I move those recommendations.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Thank you. Members, are you all in favour? If anyone's not in favour, please put it in the chat box. We have one who's not in favour, which is Councillor Brazil.
That's correct, Chair. Just giving it a couple more seconds.
Okay.
That is correct. Councillor Brazil is the one member who's indicated his wish to vote against that recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, continue, please, Councillor Pearce.
Thank you. 550, where there is another recommendation regarding the grounds maintenance review. I'm happy to move that. I don't know whether Councillor Baldry wants to say anything about it. He may do, or he may like to second it.
Councillor Baldry, are you with us?
I am back with you. I've been missing because the internet got disconnected by a helpful member of my family.
Oh, right. It was your voice that was coming across.
It was me shouting at my wife.
Right. Oh, dear.
Right.
Dear. Right.
Yeah, I'm happy to second the recommendation. Not a lot to say about it.
Right. Thank you very much. So, members, are you all in agreement with that? Anyone who's not against, please type in the chat box. No?
Just giving it a couple of seconds, Chair, but no one seems to be typing in the chat box.
Ah, right.
So I think we can assume that recommendation, minute E9019, is therefore up. Councillor Hodgson 549, which is the...
So Councillor Hodgson is voting against and everybody else is in favour, yes?
She's voting against, sorry, Chair, for clarification for the public record. As
to do with the Ivy
Councillor
Bridge.
Brazil, yeah, so actually for recommendation E8919, which is the Ivy Bridge regeneration report, there are 2 votes against, being Councillors Brazil and Councillor Hodgson.
Right.
For minute E9019.
The previous one. The
correct.
previous recommendation, not this one.
That's correct. And for the current one, which is E9019, grounds maintenance review, nobody has indicated a wish to vote against that or abstain on that application. So that, therefore, we can assume is a unanimous vote. Thank you, Chair.
Fine.
Thank you, Mr. White, for clarifying that. I was getting to get a bit panicky that this good news story was being voted against.
Ah, well, no, it appears to be okay. Right, thank you. So, members, I think that concludes the agenda for today. Is anyone anything else that they wish to add or say at this point in time? If not, I will thank you all for bearing probably with me when I got lost a couple of times. And also I thank the staff and the members of staff who have been present today who have helped us out. And also it was good to see Councillor May, who was able to join us. And we do very much bear with you, David, because we know how things are for you, and we are always glad to see you when you can join us. And if we don't have any other business, then I've got has anyone else got nothing to say, in which case I will close this part of the meeting.
Yes,
however, we've got the leader will be having a session shortly afterwards. So if you'd like to have a 5-minute break, and then we will come back again in, say, 5 minutes time. Is that okay, Councillor Pearce?